The upcoming Cardfight Vanguard IF anime has been catching the attention of a lot of people who aren't actually into Cardfight Vanguard yet. There are people who are really interested in this new anime and want to watch it as it's airing because they're interested in what they've seen from it. It seems to be taking a very different approach to the franchise. It seems to be more of a magical girl type anime than it is a card game anime, which is very unique and interesting, and obviously that would attract new fans. However, those new fans are going to have quite a bit of difficulty watching it as it's airing because it seems like this is a series that heavily relies on lore and world building and already existing continuity stuff. And so basically, this video is here for me to try my best to sum up hundreds and hundreds of anime episodes worth of lore and world building and continuity stuff to get you caught up to speed with everything you need to know to watch Cardfight Vanguard IF, even if you don't know anything about Cardfight Vanguard. So please bear with me because this is going to be a little bit difficult, but I'm going to try my hardest anyway, and I do sincerely hope that if you're someone who is interested in Cardfight Vanguard IF, that you give it a shot, right? And that you give it a chance, because I like Cardfight Vanguard, and I think it's a really good franchise, and I hope you enjoy it. So, a couple things I'm going to get out of the way immediately is if you want my opinions of Cardfight Vanguard IF, I've already released a video just talking about the general reveal of the arc and everything, and giving my opinions and speculation as to what will happen in it. I now have that link in the description and in the end card if that's what you want. This is more just going to be summing up everything that's happened, or at least everything that a new fan needs to know going into Cardfight Vanguard IF. Now, of course, my personal recommendation as someone who is into Cardfight Vanguard is that you start with the first series of the anime and just work your way through it. But of course, if you do that, there's a lot of episodes there, and by the time you get caught up, the IF anime would have probably long finished because it's multiple hundreds of episodes. So of course, that's not entirely viable, and plus, maybe you're someone who is only into the magical girl elements, and those don't really exist up until this point. So the way I'm going to be wording this is kind of as like an FAQ type thing. I'm going to be bringing up a lot of questions that new fans might be asking, and I'm going to be answering them to the best of my ability. And another thing to note as well is that, of course, the anime hasn't actually started airing yet. I will make more videos about the anime as it airs, but, well, because it hasn't aired yet, I don't know what's going to happen in it fully, and so I don't know how beginner-friendly it's going to be and what things they're just going to explain in the anime itself. So I don't know if they're going to bother to explain all this stuff to new fans, but I'm going to explain it here just in case. So the first question is, what is the reboot? To make a long story short, Cardfight Vanguard launched in 2011 with the original 2011 anime. This anime was pretty successful, and it gained a sequel series, G, afterwards. And this G series focused on a new main character and their adventures. However, for the purpose of this video, we're going to throw most of that out. So even if you're someone who's seen all that stuff, it doesn't really matter, because in 2018, Bushiroad rebooted Cardfight Vanguard, both the trading card game and the anime. Now, we're not really going to talk too much about what effect that had on the card game here, because it doesn't really matter. Luckily, Cardfight Vanguard IF doesn't actually seem to tie into the card game itself all that much, more just the continuity and characters overall. But in 2018, we got a new Cardfight Vanguard anime, and the thing that gets confusing is that even the fans don't really know what to call this rebooted anime. Some people call it the Cardfight Vanguard reboot, some people call it Cardfight Vanguard 2018, some people call it Cardfight Vanguard V series. Yeah, if you see any of those three names thrown around, you now know what anime we're talking about. It's a much shorter, much more condensed version of the anime that's actually a manga adaptation. However, this reboot is still probably quite a bit too long for you to be able to binge and get done in time for the IF anime. Whenever I talk about any continuity or anything else, I'm mainly referring to the reboot because the original doesn't really matter. See, the original actually does things quite differently to the reboot, and if I was to go over all the stuff that happened in the original, I'd just be wasting your time, because it's different to how the reboot handles everything anyway, and this seems to be tying into the reboot, so yeah. So what is Planet Cray. So this is basically me covering the overall premise of Cardfight Vanguard and how the fantasy element works. So one thing to note is that Cardfight Vanguard intentionally leaves most of its fantasy and supernatural elements fairly vague. It likes having most of itself be focused on just Earth and the human characters, and so whenever the fantasy and supernatural stuff comes in, they never fully explain everything. You kind of have to take everything the anime tells you with a grain of salt, because they never like going into the specifics of explaining how everything works. So I'm going to explain how everything works, but of course, if everything feels a little weird and out of nowhere, then that's intentional. They do that to kind of keep up this sort of mysterious and weird tone surrounding the mystical elements, which I like, but it does make it very difficult to just kind of give a Cliff Notes version of. So yes, Cardfight Vanguard takes place on planet Earth, but in this version of planet Earth, there is a parallel world that is connected to Earth called planet Cray. This connection is not physical, it's not tangible, it's not even really viewable. Instead, it's more of a sort of mystical, just kind of thing connecting the two. It's never fully explained what that quite entails, but the two are very heavily connected, and what happens in one world is mirrored in the other world in some way, shape, or form. The residents of planet Cray have been stuck in the middle of an everlasting war between all of the different clans that have formed there. See, each of the different residents of Cray is part of a clan, and all of those clans are fighting each other. And how this kind of visualizes itself on Earth is through Cardfight Vanguard. See, every resident on planet Cray is a Cardfight Vanguard trading card, and each of the clans is a deck of cards. And every time that a character on Earth plays with their deck of cards, that mirrors the war that's happening on Cray. How does this work logistically? How did we create the cards if they're connected to... It doesn't matter. Like I said, they never really delve into that all too much. It doesn't really matter. So to most humans on planet Earth, they just think of Cray as a fictional place that was made up for the purposes of the card game. To them, it is like real life, where to us, planet Cray is just something that exists in the lore and the world building of the card game itself, but doesn't actually exist in real life. But a lot of characters in the anime do actually understand that Cray really does exist, and that the two planets kind of have a knock-on effect on each other. And in fact, one of the biggest elements of world building in Cardfight Vanguard is the idea that you can kind of resonate with the units you use. For example, if you are particularly good at using your Cardfight Vanguard deck, then you will sort of resonate and kind of vibe in harmony with your unit on planet Cray, and this will cause a particularly strong connection called Cyqualia, which will give its user magic eyes that will make them better at playing the card game than any average person. Who is Emmie Sendo? Emmie Sendo is the protagonist of Cardfight Vanguard IF. She is also the little sister of Aichi Sendo, the main protagonist of the franchise as a whole. Aichi Sendo is a fairly shy and timid school kid who is bullied on a regular basis, but slowly comes out of his shell and becomes less shy and more confident when he does get into the Cardfight Vanguard card game. His journey mainly focuses on him getting into the card game, starting off not too great at it, but getting slowly better over time, and eventually getting to the point where he's taking part in tournaments, befriending lots of people within the community, and eventually getting to the point where he is revered by other Cardfight Vanguard players because he's just that good at the card game now. When the anime starts off, he's really reckless and bad at looking after himself, and so it's up to Emmie Sendo, his little sister, to help look after him, make his breakfast, make sure he's up in time to get to school, all that other stuff. But she quickly realizes that she's needing to do that less and less often as time progresses, because his enthusiasm for the card game has given him a drive to look after himself better. And so this gets Emmie interested in Cardfight Vanguard. In the reboot, we don't go any further than that. That's where we kind of leave Emmie off. So you don't need to know too much about Emmie other than the fact that she's the little sister of the previous main protagonist. Who is Kouji Ibuki? So you know how we already talked about how how good you are at the card game relies on how strong your bond is to your units on planet Cray. Well, Kouji Ibuki comes into the picture around about the middle of the reboot using the Deleters deck, which is actually what that story arc is named after, the Deleters arc. And that's because Kouji Ibuki and his deck have the ability to delete someone's connection to Planet Cray. So if you have a really strong connection to Planet Cray, then that makes you really, really good at Cardfight Vanguard. Well, if you get your connection deleted by Ibuki, then that completely destroys any enthusiasm or enjoyment of the game you've ever had. It doesn't necessarily make it impossible for you to play Cardfight Vanguard ever again, but it makes you indifferent, and it's impossible to play particularly well when you don't particularly care for the card game at all. What makes things even more interesting is that Ibuki does have a small connection to Aichi, and that connection comes in the form of Blaster Blade. See, Blaster Blade is basically the mascot for the entire franchise, and he is Aichi's favorite card. And that card was given to him by Kai, his rival, but Kai got that card from Kouji Ibuki back when they were little kids. And so Ibuki was the character who pulled Blaster Blade from a pack originally, and that extremely rare and valuable card eventually made its way indirectly to Aichi through Kai. So Kouji Ibuki is the original owner of Blaster Blade, and he comes back and meets Aichi for the first time, and he goes around deleting everyone's connection to Vanguard. Eventually, he comes to regret this and goes through a character arc revolving him regretting his actions and wanting to become a better person. So he ditches his Deleters deck and instead swaps it out for a Neon Messiah deck. So now he has ditched his ability to delete people's connection to Vanguard, and better yet, the other characters who were deleted managed to find a method of gaining their connection to Vanguard back again. And that method was to just keep playing the card game so many times that they eventually started to gain their enthusiasm for the game back again. So we now pick up in Cardfight Vanguard IF with Ibuki trying his hardest to make up for his past regrets, showing people that he's a better person now and that he's moved on from deleting people. Who is Cyka? Cyka is actually a new character in Cardfight Vanguard IF. So there's nothing to say about her, basically. Most of the other cast are old characters that are coming back from the rest of the reboot, but Cyka's new, so you don't need to worry about her. She should hopefully be explained in her entirety in Cardfight Vanguard IF. Who are the Tatsunagis? This is the part you really want to be paying attention to if you're a new fan that wants to be watching this story arc. I don't know how relevant this stuff's going to be and how much this stuff's going to be re-explained to new viewers, but it is important, so I recommend you pay attention. So Planet Cray and Earth have a connection between the two of them, as we've already established. And there's a unit on Planet Cray called Ezel that has the job of concert master, which means that he needs to keep the rhythm and the harmony of the connection between Earth and Planet Cray intact. He basically needs to make sure that nothing goes wrong on either planet that throws the two off sync with each other, because that would mean vague bad things, basically. That's where kind of the crux of the conflict and a lot of the fantasy elements of this franchise come into place. And so Ezel, to make sure that he can actually keep an eye on Earth, he decides to diff-ride the Tatsunagi family. See, the Tatsunagi family, they are a family that are connected to Cardfight Vanguard, the card game, quite heavily. In fact, we don't know much about them, but they always seem to be there whenever anything big happens. Whenever there's a tournament, there's always one of them there. Whenever there's any supernatural elements, there's always one of them there. And that's because each member of the Tatsunagi family ends up inheriting the role of concert master, which means they are diff-ridden by Ezel. Now, what is diff-riding? Diff-riding is when a unit from Planet Cray takes over the body of a human. And so now, by diff-riding a Tatsunagi, Ezel can keep an eye on Earth directly by becoming a human. At one point, Takuo Tatsunagi was the one who was different by Ezel, and he was put in charge of looking after Earth as Concert Master to make sure nothing went wrong. To do this, he created, again, it's never fully explained how he does this, but he uses his powers of Concert Master to create 3 humans to help him look after Earth. And those are the Tatsunaki sisters, also known as Ultra Rare. So those are Korin Tatsunaki, Reka Tatsunaki, and more importantly, Suiko Tatsunaki, as we'll get to in a second. But of course, Takuto fails, and that's when Kouji Ibuki comes in, and Kouji Ibuki starts deleting everyone. So things don't go great, and yeah. Because of this, Takuto gets replaced by his brother Gnome Tatsunaki. So now Gnome is the Concert Master for Earth currently. And so now Gnome is the head of the Tatsunaki family, and he's the one looking after Earth, making sure nothing goes wrong, basically. Who is Suiko Tatsunaki then? Suiko Tatsunaki is one of the main characters of this upcoming story arc, and she is one of the Tatsunaki sisters. They form the idol group Ultra Rare, and Suiko hasn't really done all that much. That's the thing. Korin, her sister, already had a character arc to do with Aichi and everything, but that stuff doesn't really matter. And in fact, it culminates in Korin getting her memories wiped of everything that happened anyway, and then getting those memories back again a few episodes later. Yeah, the reboot's a bit all over the place in terms of story writing, I guess, and all that other stuff. But Suiko is one of the 3 sisters, and so she is in the same family as Gnome, and she is an important character in this arc, and yeah, she doesn't really have all too much else going on for her at the moment in the reboot. And so that should be pretty much everything you need to know. Yes, there's a lot more that happens than just everything I explained, but hopefully that was the most important lore and world building and continuity stuff explained anyway. Because like I said, this is a really long franchise, and so if I was to sit down and explain absolutely everything to you, we would be here all day. But hopefully I've explained most of the important things that have directly interacted with the main cast of the IV story arc. So you'll be able to go into that arc knowing what the deal is with them and everything that's directly interacted with them up to this point. Hopefully, everything I gave you here was enough information to make it so that you can understand everything that's happening in the anime when it does air. I will be releasing more videos as the anime airs, so if you're someone who's starting with IV and you're confused as to everything that happens in the first episode, then definitely keep an eye on the YouTube channel and even the Discord server in the description below, where you can directly ask me these questions, and I will see you later with some more Vanguard content.